Okay, church, any sane people left in society, it is time to wake up and rise up. Hey, I'm Andrew Rodriguez, and welcome to Psycho Bible, battling about psychology and theology. And I'm going to go a little bit off the cuff today. I just got a few notes. I got to get this message out there. It's urgent. I haven't done a video in a couple weeks because I've been sick. Can't really record with a hoarse voice. But in the meantime, some crazy stuff has been happening in the world, and I got to talk about it. Who would have thought conversion therapy would be the big subject these days? Well, Canada just passed Bill C4, an explosive piece of legislation that undermines basic human rights, and now the UK is considering their own ban on what they call conversion practices. And what these bans are now showing is just what the agenda has been all along, and people are finally starting to wake up. It's not about banning abusive or coercive forms of therapy. No, it never has been about that. It's always been about promoting one single ideology, a pro-LGBT ideology, that if you have any degree of same-sex attraction, then that is an indication of you being a certain class, a sexual minority, and therefore to explore change in any way, whether we're talking about behavior or attractions or the way you view yourself or think, then that would be to go against your very nature, and therefore it's harmful in and of itself. It's inherently harmful to these people who have this sexual minority point of view. Well, these bills, these bans, are codifying that perspective on homosexuality and now, of course, transgenderism too. So that if you have any sort of gender nonconformity or gender identity divergence from your biological sex, and that means that you are innately transgender. There's no science to back up these ideas. We've known for years, for like decades now at this point, that the born gay and cannot change mantra is false. Most recently we've had Lisa Diamond, who herself is a lesbian psychologist, speaking even at TED Talks saying, it's not true, we need to stop saying that.
But there are three problems with the born that way argument. First, it's not scientifically accurate. Second, it's not legally necessary. But third, and most important, it's actually unjust. And it's time to retire that argument for LGBT equality. Now, my passion for this issue stems from my own research on sexual orientation. Over 20 years ago, I started a study tracking over time 100 women with different sexual identities. And over the years, I was frankly surprised by some of the changes that they went through. Some of the lesbians ended up involved with men. Some of the heterosexual women ended up getting involved with women. And when these sorts of things would happen, women would say to me that they thought there must be something wrong with them, since their experiences didn't fit the conventional wisdom that sexual orientation is fixed at birth. So that brings us to the first problem with the born that way argument, that it's not scientifically accurate.
There's no evidence. We've got the twin studies from going back to the 90s and then early 2000s showing that if you have someone who identifies as gay, who has same-sex attraction, and they're a twin, they have an identical twin, so they have the same genes, less than 50% of the time, I think actually when you looked at even closer at the data, it was like a third of the time, the other twin was also same-sex attracted. But that's the same genes. It should be 100%. So just with the twin studies alone, we should know, this is not biologically determined. But then we got, I think it was in 2019, the Ganna et al. Study that was published in the journal Science. Could you ask for a more mainstream journal showing that it's like about 1% of sexual orientation is determined by genes. So basically barely anything is impacted by genes when it comes to sexual orientation or sexual attraction or sexual behavior or same-sex sexual behavior. So we've known this for years. In fact, Lisa Diamond is pretty new. She's like the main voice. But even another secular psychologist, Linda Garnett's, going back to 2001, has been saying this whole paradigm of born gay cannot change, that there's these strict categories of heterosexual, homosexual, or straight, gay, and bi is simply false. It's on a continuum. We've been saying this for years. No one's listening. But anyway, these bands don't care about the science. These activists don't care about the science. It was never about protecting LGBT people or children or youth from abusive and coercive forms of counseling. Because the reality is, it's always been about promoting one viewpoint, that this is something you innately are, and to try to change it is terrible. It's the worst thing in the world. I mean, just look at Sam Brinton, the poster boy, the spokesperson of the LGBT lobby. He's a spokesperson for the Trevor Project. You notice my videos on YouTube, if I ever speak about this subject, YouTube just by default puts a little in-context warning from the Trevor Project, making sure you know what their definition of conversion therapy is. And it's completely false, because I could tell you over and over again what real therapy for unwanted same-sex attraction actually is, and how the conversion therapy is a pejorative, and it's a red herring. It's just something to throw people off the scent, get them thinking of things like electroshock and all these terrible things that doesn't happen. But doesn't matter what the truth is, this LGBT lobby does not care about the truth. So they just got to make sure they put their in-context warning right there on all the videos that ever mention this subject. So you can watch Sam Brinton from the Trevor Project, that Google loves so much to put on my videos, and you can hear him speaking at the Google headquarters, making it very clear that these bans that have been going on since 2012, starting in California for minors, has never been just about attacking therapists, licensed therapists and psychologists who are practicing like literal torture and electroshock and ice baths and shaming techniques. It's always been about silencing the narrative that homosexual behavior is a sin or is dysfunctional or disorder, desire, and there should be a desire to change or repent or abstain from the behavior and explore the potential of change in attraction or identity. It's always been about silencing the other narratives. Well, who are the main proponents of other narratives? The church, religion. And so Sam Brinton admits it when he's talking to Google at their headquarters, that their objective has always been to find a way to go after the churches. That these therapy bans, these sexual orientation change efforts, SOCI bans or conversion therapy bans, have always been proxy attacks against the church.
So also not a lawyer, but the California law, the way I was reading it, said something specific about mental health professionals.
Yes.
So does that wording make it limiting, or is that kind of, do you wish that would be more broad?
This is why I should have just had Sam up here. So the first space that I'll enter with is, yes, it is limiting. That is partially how you get some of these bills through, is by limiting it to licensed mental health professionals and taking away and making that addressed. You can't take a license away from someone who doesn't have a license. Religious organizations will probably practice this for the rest of time, unless I can figure out a way to stop it. Like, this is something that I may not be able to find every little camp, right? I may not be able to find every pastor, but I can make it something that culturally is unacceptable. 3 years ago, if you would have, I really wish, again, we wish we would have screenshot this. If you would have looked up conversion therapy, it would have been Exodus International, the very first one, with just lists of providers. everything would have been about these positive spaces of like how to get connected. And now it is, holy crap, this is a horrible thing, it's illegal in 2 states, like it's much more difficult for people to get access to it. So that's kind of the way that I address this. And we actually have a lawyer in the room, so I can, if I'm not completely correct, we can correct some of those spaces. But that's a space that as I see it, is that yes, it's directly addressing mental health professionals, but it's also by proxy affecting everyone else because it's getting that reporting in. So, yeah. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And the church is finally waking up to this reality. Where you been for the past 10 years, church? Well, welcome to the party. There's been those of us, such as those of us that in Voice of the Voiceless or the different ex-gay ministries that have been holding the ground and actually doing the work, who've been trying to raise the alarm for years. And the church has been silent on it, as more and more states and municipalities have passed these bans, but because these bans were for therapists, the church hasn't spoken up barely at all. Now, finally, they're realizing, oh, they don't want just therapists, they don't just want licensed therapists, they're going after counselors, they're going after pastors, they're going after what we can speak in our churches, how we pray with people, how we minister to them. Guess what? That's always been the agenda. So, hey, welcome to the party. And it's insane to think of this, but the one leading the charge is John MacArthur. I normally am not that big a fan of him because he's always attacking Pentecostals. But hey, I will gladly link arms with him. And he helped rally the troops and encourage people to speak a couple Sundays ago on the biblical view of sexuality. And 4,000 churches across North America spoke up in defiance of Bill C-4. Well, guess what? It can't end there. We need to do more than that. We need to keep pushing back. And the main way you can push back is start questioning the narrative. So many of these Christians who are speaking up have to feel like they have to pay lip service to the LGBT talking points that, yes, we understand we're against conversion therapy, we're against ex-gay ministry, we're against therapy for unwanted same-sex attraction because, yes, we understand it's harmful and, yes, it's not effective. No, guess what? Push back on that. Demand to see the research that actually proves it's harmful. Show me the prospective studies that show measurements of people's well-being and their mental health prior to starting therapy, and then after doing the therapy, what are the measurements? Guess what? There's only one study that does that. And one study, that same study, that checks their levels of same-sex attraction, their sexual behavior, their sexual identity prior to starting therapy and afterwards, and sees whether or not the therapy was effective in helping them explore sexuality change. And guess what? That study just came out 2021 by Carolyn Pila and Phil Sutton, studying clients of Joe Nicolosi Sr. and Jr., their different practices. And what did it show? Well-being improved. That's going against the narrative. And their sexuality did change on a continuum, of course. But their attractions changed from homosexual toward heterosexual. At least we saw a decrease in the same-sex attraction, and in cases, an increase in opposite-sex attraction. And the identity changed from more homosexual to more heterosexual. Even though we don't even actually prefer using such terms, but this is the narrative. These are the terms that are used in culture, so we tend to use those for research purposes. The behavior also we saw a change in. So, and this was a 5-year study. You couldn't find a better study. And who's talking about it? Barely anyone. All right, we're trying to get the word out on it, but it's being silenced as much as possible. So what do we get? We get the narrative still being pushed, and so many Christians who are weak-kneed and have their tail between their legs, who just feel like they have to appease the culture, instead of questioning, wait a second, if the media has been lying about so many other things, And educational institutions are pushing all this stuff about gender and transgenderism that we know is clearly false. And we just see the media, the movies, the film industry pushing this narrative. What else, when it comes to LGBT, have we been just swallowing without thinking about? Well, let's go back to homosexuality itself, same-sex attraction. All this stuff we've been hearing about counseling for it being dangerous, being coercive, being forced on people, being deceptive and consumer fraud. Let's look at the actual evidence. So one thing you can do to really push back is to start questioning what you've been led to believe all these years. Demand to see the evidence. Don't buy anything until you see it for yourself. Because the reality is, this LGBT lobby doesn't care about the facts. They know that coercive and aversive techniques aren't being used in modern day professional therapy, and not even in most of your religiously mediated ex-gay ministries. They know that. But they'll constantly conflate professional therapy and ethical religious ministry with forced physical conversion. These sort of efforts that we see in third world countries and Muslim countries, where someone has same-sex attraction, you sort of beat it out of them, or you force them to go through some sort of transgender surgery so that, well, if you're attracted to the same sex, then we're going to turn you into the opposite sex. Like, this is not something that is condoned or even thought of in any modern country that uses professional therapy. But because the UN did their global report back in 2019, and they just lump it all together, these third world countries, they use these backwater techniques to fight homosexuality in the most barbaric ways possible, gets lumped in with people doing ethical counseling for people who are struggling with their same-sex attraction experiences and behaviors. They know that, though. They're not stupid. They know the truth, these activists, but they'll continue to conflate it all so that they can push their own narrative. They don't want the truth. They don't want the truth getting out there to the masses and to policymakers. And then, of course, they'll conflate conversion therapy or sexual orientation change efforts or just professional therapy for same-sex attraction, unwanted same-sex attraction. They'll conflate it with things as simple as prayer, as self-help, as exorcisms. These things are not therapy. They're not even counseling, for the most part. I mean, you just watch the recent debate, if you can even call it that, that Unbelievable did between in the UK discussing their conversion therapy ban they're proposing, and the anti-therapy advocate tried to say that she did conversion therapy. Well, what does she describe as her conversion therapy experience? First, it was prayer by herself. Well, that's not therapy. Then it was finally talking to her church, and they prayed with her. And then she said that she did some counseling. But what was it really? It was mostly just praying over her. And then doing exorcisms. None of that is therapy. And most of that is very rare. But what happens if you ban therapy is that's the sort of approach that people are left with. Well, the activists know this, so then they're going to try to find a way to stop even that stuff in these bans. They're going to go after churches. So this is the problem we end up when churches stopped rising up and fighting for the right of people to get actual professional therapy and for therapists to have the right to practice just good therapy. I mean, Jordan Peterson mentions this in the few comments he's ever made about the conversion therapy ban. It's like when you're just promoting one viewpoint, well, that's not even therapy. When you're just doing gay affirmative therapy, it's not even therapy. It's just telling someone to embrace an experience as now their identity and try to turn them into activists as well, getting them to come out to their family and their friends and loved ones and get them all on their side, and then to come out to the rest of society and get society to change. How is that therapy? That's not therapy. That's just activism in the therapy office.
And then so now in Canada, because they banned conversion therapy, it's now all affirmation therapy.
Right.
There's no such thing as affirmation therapy.
Right. No, it's insane. I mean, the semantic game that was used in order to say, well, conversion therapy, which was at one time using electric shock to treat homosexuals,
Yeah.
and saying that that's the same thing as you have a gender-confused 12-year-old.
Look, I had a 14-year-old kid who was a client of mine, and he was in the mid stages of puberty. He was a pretty creative kid, agreeable kid as well, right? And that's important. So he had a bit of a feminine temperament. That also meant he could be pushed around fairly easily. Well, there was an aggressively gay guy in his school was hitting on him and trying to convince him that he was gay. Well, he didn't know. So he wanted to talk to me about it. It's like, well, I was going to tell him. What the hell do I know about this kid?
Exactly.
And I wanted to hear what his problems were and how it might be sorted out, what he wanted. And like that's what you do in therapy, is you help people sort out their problems. Now this idea is you come to me with an axiomatic claim, whatever it is about your identity, and my job is to rubber stamp it. It's like, I'm not a therapist then. So this is not only insane, this insistence. Like, I like to think of truth, untruth, and anti-truth, right? And the notion that therapists affirm is an anti-truth. Because, look, let's say you come to me and you say, you have a proposition about yourself, and I say, no, I'm your therapist. No, that's wrong. It's like, that's not good therapy. But neither is you have a proposition about yourself, and you're disturbed enough to come to a therapeutic session, and I say, yes, you're right. It's like, I don't know if you're right. And if you're so right, why are you here? Like, what are we talking about if you're already right?
True therapy looks at their conflict over their attractions and their behavior and asks the why question. Helps them explore it. Like, let's have a curious approach. That's what actually happens in counseling for unwanted same-sex attraction. We have this curious approach with them, and we allow them to explore things and see where it goes. So then what happens? Anything that does not go with the narrative gets labeled as hate and extremism. So, what happened recently? We had the Global Project Against Hate and Extremism, GPHE, released their report on the different conversion therapy players online. So who's in their list? You got the Alliance for Therapeutic Choice and Scientific Integrity, formerly NARTH. I'm involved with the Alliance. I'm a member of them. Go to their conference. Listen to them. You'll find these are the most professional therapists you'll ever find. They use the most sophisticated and innovative approaches with their clients, most ethically sound techniques. They're not pushing an agenda. They're not coercing anyone. In fact, if they ever get a client who shows ambivalence or they get an adolescent, they try to work with the family and they make it very clear to them that they're going to respect the client's autonomy, that their choices. Well, that's what good therapists do and good psychologists do. Who else is on their list of extremists? You got the American College of Pediatricians. God forbid you have pediatricians who believe that boys are boys and girls are girls. And don't go along with this narrative that other so-called doctors are promoting, that you can change sexes and that there is no true gender binary. You got Brothers Road, who runs the Journey to Manhood retreats that I haven't experienced, but I know so many other people, some clients who've gone to those retreats and said it was one of the most powerful healing weekends. And the reality is that those Journey to Manhood retreats are really just men's retreats. They're not even necessarily specifically about same-sex attraction, but they are very beneficial to guys who deal with that. And they need to get in touch with their masculinity and find a brotherhood of other men. You got Core Issues Trust in the UK. You got Courage, a Catholic apostolate. You got Desert Stream Ministries and a Living Waters program. You got Exodus, which people don't realize Exodus still exists. It was only Exodus International that closed, but you got Exodus Global Alliance and Exodus Latin America and Brazil and Asia Pacific that still exist. You got different counseling centers that I'm familiar with, like Institute for Healthy Families, You got an international affiliate of the Alliance, the International Federation for Therapeutic and Counseling Choice. You got simple support groups like Joel 225. All it is just a support group for guys. Totally voluntary. That's on their list of extremism and hate. See, what this report is doing is targeting people who just have a different value system than the LGBT religion. This cult-like mentality that if you have same-sex attraction, then you must fall in line with our dogma, that you therefore are gay, or you are trans if you have gender nonconformity, and you must adhere to it. And if you ever decide to change, or it's like, once you enter this cult, you can't go back. We will punish you and silence you. So many different ministries. Restored Hope Network is on here. Reintegrative Therapy Association. This is the association of the current version of Nicolosi's work. And it's what happened after this report was released. Just a few days later, YouTube banned all of Reintegrative Therapy Association's videos. They were professionally done videos just demonstrating scripts of real therapy sessions with clients. These are demonstrations of how the therapy works. And what you see in here is it's not coercive, it's not aversive. It's using mainstream counseling approaches like trauma reprocessing, like from EMDR, or from image transformation therapy, or just mindfulness. Mindfulness, which is like the big craze in therapy right now, how that is being used to help people explore their sexuality. And as a byproduct, they see and they experience a shift in their feelings. And they see a decrease in their shame and an increase in their well-being and their confidence in who they are as a male or as a female. And these same approaches are being used not just for treating same-sex attraction, but we have evidence, studies showing that it's effective in using for things like binge eating or for heterosexual pornography and sexual addiction. So these are just mainstream approaches being used for one topic that the LGBT lobby deems something you should not ever go to counseling for. It's really, they're not going after the techniques, they're not going after the approaches, they're going after your therapy goals. You as a client, if you want to push back, you need to demand access to therapy and counseling that matches your values and your goals. That's what's going to make a difference. When more and more clients speak up and say, no, I don't want just a therapist who listens to me as I explore this issue. I want a therapist who's going to help me really explore this. Who isn't just going to listen to me go on, take a neutral approach, but someone who's competent and will help me get to the roots. Help me actually explore this attraction and what is underneath it. And who will help me resolve those underlying issues. And won't push some pro-gay agenda and tell me just accept it and embrace that as my identity. And to you activists, I'm going to start calling you what you are. You're not pro-LGBTQ. What you are is anti-human. You're anti-sex. You're anti-gender. Why? Because God made us male and female and calls the two to become one flesh and to propagate our species, to be creative in the world. And this is apparent in nature. This is not just a religious dogma. This is reality. This is the way the world works. You can see it in nature. The pro-LGBT lobby is anti-human nature. All it does is create a culture of death. It goes against the very nature. So much so that if you were someone who identified as trans or gender non-binary or gender fluid at some point, and you decide, no, I don't want this anymore. I want to go back to identifying with my body, with my biology. You cannot get help, not professional help, in your efforts there. And if you had attractions to the same sex, sexual attractions, and now you want to explore attractions to the opposite sex because that is what your body is designed for. You cannot get help for that. So the anti-human lobby wants to keep you from functioning according to your own biological design. That's why I say they're anti-human. They're anti-sex. Because sex is about recognizing the difference in humanity. We are bifurcated into two sexes. This is reality. And sex really is about the union of the two sexes to form a family. The very building block of society and civilization. To undermine that desire that people have to do what is normative is anti-human. So what you can do is start pushing back. Stop using their terminology on their terms. And finally, we can push back by stop being beholden to the big tech. I'm still on YouTube. I understand this is very difficult to build a following anywhere else without already having a following on big tech. But I don't intend to stay here forever. I know they're coming after me at some point. They've already tried to flag some of my videos and I fought against them. On Facebook I keep getting warnings of some type that my videos just exploring these topics is deemed hate speech. Well, it's going to get to the point where if you want the truth on these topics, you're going to have to look elsewhere. You're not going to find it on YouTube and Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. They're going to, and definitely not TikTok eventually. They're going to do everything they can to make it so they don't want to see the truth and they don't want you to see the truth either. So you're going to have to go on these alternative platforms. You're going to have to do the searches yourself. So that said, be sure to follow me on the other alternative platforms. I always mention them in the descriptions of my videos. I'm now on Rumble. I'm beginning the slow process of importing all my videos over to there as well. So please, join me on Rumble. Support the creators who are being banned, like Reintegrative Therapy Association. They're on Rumble, they're on Odyssey, I believe. Go to their actual website. You're going to have to find the content elsewhere. If you desire to seek truth, you're going to have to keep seeking, because these platforms we've been using for so long aren't going to deliver the truth to you. They want you to think one way and not question the narrative. Like I've been saying, it's time to wake up and rise up. Start speaking up before we don't have a voice any longer. Alright. That said, I got some videos coming up that are going to be very exciting. We're going to actually start doing some interviews this year on my channel. I've been really interested in doing that for a while, but I have so much to say myself that I wanted to build a foundation on my channel of all things that I've been thinking and what I've been learning and how I see things. And now I want to start interacting with some others. So I got some videos coming up that'll be very important on this topic, interviewing people who are involved in the research and can explain it very thoroughly. So if you care about truth, keep watching. Until next time, God bless.